Hey, and thanks for stopping by to see what we got to say this week. Hopefully, you watched last week's, and I really do hope that what I'm doing here is helping people to understand something, whether they got one little thing out of it or whether the whole thing was somewhat new to them. Anyway, as always, like and follow on Facebook, on YouTube, and if you're on YouTube, go over to Facebook and like and follow. If you're on Facebook, go over to YouTube. And if you don't know where the links are, go to the website right here, patmcclanahan.com, and you can find links to my Facebook and to my blog post on YouTube. So if you do that for me, please. Need to get my numbers up. And last week, before we get started, I just want to make sure that people understand. I have no thought in my head that I am conveying all there is to know about this situation. You know, people far greater than I have written and spoken to the issue in the Middle East. I am just trying to point out some of the things that have gone on from a historical perspective that we tend to forget, and we get caught up in rhetoric, we get caught up in emotions, and if we would just look at the truth of what is going on, what has gone on in that region, then maybe we can all kind of calm it down and be real about this. So last week we talked a little bit about the whole region from about biblical times till just about World War I. And one of the things that I was really trying to get across was that this region has been the center of this kingdom and this empire, and this group wanting control and that group wanting control, and different nationalities, different ethnicities, different religions. It all just kind of heaps on top of it and makes for a very complicated situation that has no easy solution. And anybody that believes, well, if one side would just do this or one side would just do that, no, it's nowhere near that easy. So we pick it up in the late 1800s. The Ottoman Empire, if you remember, came into power in 1517 and ruled for almost 400 years. In the late 1800s, some of the European countries started to take away territory, through military conquest. France was taking away some of the territory along the North African coast. Great Britain was attacking the Arabian Peninsula. Italy took over Libya. So the Ottoman Empire was struggling. It was kind of on the downhill side, losing power, losing territory, losing influence in the world. And so when World War I came along, obviously they were not going to connect up with France and Britain, who had been taking away territory. So they allied themselves with Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire against France and Britain. And World War I went along in that kind of a fashion. Now, during the war, there were several things that are kind of interesting. One was that Britain supported some of the Arabs who were living in the area that was controlled by the Ottoman Empire. The Brits supported them because they wanted to revolt against the Ottoman rule, and so Britain kind of allowed the Arabs to help them out militarily, because they both were fighting for the same thing, for the defeat of the Ottoman Empire. Now, one of the interesting things that came out of that was that the Arabs had this concept or this idea in their mind that the um, British were going to help them after the war was over to create a homeland for the Arab people. And so there was kind of this, well, hey, you work with us and we'll work with you kind of concept. Now, another thing that was going on before the war was even over, France and Britain in particular, but France, Britain, Italy, Russia, they were trying to decide, hey, how are we going to divide up the Ottoman Empire once once this war is over? And actually there was a decision made more by the British and the French as to how to divide this up. Now it's very interesting because they really didn't take into account the nationalities that were in the place, the religions that were in the place, the culture. And so what came out of this was a willingness, or this kind of a division. So the orange up here was going to be controlled by Russia. The blues, the dark blue was under French control. The light blue was French provided protection, but was under control or administrative control of the Arabs themselves. And the same thing with the reds here. This was British protection, and this Iraq area, the pinkish, was an Arab state under British protection. So it was ruled by the Arabs, and then Palestine actually was under Britain's control, even though this map says that it was under British, French, and Russian protection. So but Britain had the most to do with that. So we have this division, and again, this was done while the war was going on. There was really mostly, like I say, Britain and France coming together saying this is what we're going to do. So then the war ends, and the French take over their area, take control. The British move in, take control of the area that they're responsible for, and so it kind of goes along for a couple of years. One of the things that happened out of World War I was the creation of an organization called the League of Nations, which was kind of a forerunner to the current United Nations. And so after the war, France and Britain go to the League of Nations and say, hey, this is how we think the Mideast needs to be divided up and managed. And so the League of Nations said, sounds good to us, you guys take it. And so it was basically a mandate from the other governing powers across the world for France and Britain to take over this. Now, one of the things that we see is Palestine. So Palestine really had no boundaries since 135, when the Romans wanted to try to separate this area from any connection to the Jewish people, and they used the term Palestine. It had just been kind of an area. In the world after World War I, they had to define it with boundaries, and so we see boundaries here that were created between Britain and the various different organizations that were in control, governments that were in control of these other areas around. And so, this is quite different than what we think of, because in current world, we think of Palestine, usually we hear reference to the West Bank. So, but Palestine included everything that is the West Bank, which is basically from the Sea of Galilee west, all the way down. And the rest of this is not even considered to be Palestine, but it was. It was part of Palestine. And so at one point they actually talked about, if you go back and look at some of the history books of the late 1800s and early 1900s, excuse me, we find them to start talking about Western Palestine and Eastern Palestine, and then that kind of got to be too much, so then they changed the name of Eastern Palestine into Transjordan, trans meaning across the Jordan, and later it became just known as the country of Jordan. And so we have this Palestine that's under British rule. Now the Brits are kind of in a bind, because if you remember, during World War I, they kind of sided up with the Arabs and said, "Yeah, we'll help you get your home state." Right towards the very end of World War I, there was a document that the British, one of the British bureaucrats wrote up, that basically said Britain was going to help the Jews have a homeland in the region of Palestine. So now all of a sudden you're going to help the Arabs and you're going to help the Jews create a homeland in the same area. Did not set the stage for good things to happen, that's for sure. So we have that problem, or that concern now of how do we do this. And one of the things that happened after World War I, and especially after it was kind of became known that Britain was willing to help create a Jewish homeland, Jews from across Europe started immigrating into this area, causing the Arabs who were living there, just like, wait a second, how come these people are coming in? This is supposed to be our land. Even though it wasn't a nation yet, it was still Palestine. It was still under British control. But all the Jews were coming in from Europe and from other parts of the world. And so what the British said was, the Jews can't buy land in East Palestine or Transjordan. So the Jews could only own land in west of the Jordan River. And so that was where most of the Jews were congregating, because they could own land. And so they came in, they started buying land. And there would continue to be problems between the Arabs and the Jews. The Arabs continued to want their homeland. The Jews continued to want their homeland. And so, like I say, not a good scenario, because they both wanted the same area. And historically, if we look at it, the Jews had the claim from way back in history, even though they were basically exiled in 135 after the Romans defeated their rebellion. But at the same time, the Arab people that lived there, some of them had lived there for generations, even though, we'd seen kingdoms and empires and everybody else coming in and controlling the land and claiming the land. There had never been, a nation there. It had always been part of this empire or that kingdom or whatever. So there was a lot of struggle that was going on here, and it kind of kept building and building and building until the Arabs pretty much revolted, armed confrontation with the British Army. And so the British sent one of their government officials, Peel was his name, Lord Peel, to find out what was going on. And out of his investigation, he came up with the solution that they needed to divide the land. And so this is his solution. The orange would be the Jewish state, the purple would be the Arab state, the green would be controlled by Great Britain, basically controlling Jerusalem with an avenue to get to the Mediterranean Sea, just, I suppose, for purposes of getting supplies, maintaining a connection to the sea for military purposes. Anyway, this was presented. The Jews thought it was a good idea. They accepted it. Said, "Hey, we'll go with this." The Arabs thought it was a bad idea. They didn't like it. One of pretty much the reasoning there was that the orange land contained 330,000 Arabs that would have to get leave their homes, leave their communities, their businesses, whatever, and move into the Arab land. So that was 330,000 compared with 1,200 Jews that lived in this area that would have to pick up and move here. And so there was a feeling of unfairness, and the Arabs were still trying to figure out why do the Jews get any of this land at all. They haven't been here for thousands of years. So there went one opportunity to create the two states, an Arab state and a Jewish state, and it didn't happen. As things continued on, Jews continued to immigrate into this area. The Arabs continued to object. And one of the things that was going on more so after World War II was the Jewish communities were building schools, they were building community, transportation systems, creating their businesses. They were buying land from the Arabs. They were engaged in agriculture, and so they were kind of creating a presence there, even though they didn't have a country. And so that continued, and that frustrated the Arabs even further. Out of World War II came the United Nations. The League of Nations went away. The United Nations was created, and so this problem continued to be real. And so in 1948, the United Nations, or 1947, excuse me, the United Nations said, we're going to have a land of Israel. And so they basically created a land. So they created a division, and it kind of looks similar to the Peel Commission and what they recommended, but slightly different. So the blue here is the Jewish land, and the brown or gray, whatever, is the Arab land, and then Jerusalem again is an internationally administered city. So what we have is, piece of land here, piece of land here, piece of land here. So it's kind of broken up, but an attempt at trying to be fair. And again, the Israelis accepted this and said, "Yep, we're gonna walk this one out. We're gonna live this." The Arabs continued to refuse to accept this, and so the United Nations put this out there, said this is how it's going to be. And so basically the British, who had been here for a while, said, okay, we're done then. We're going home. The Israelis are setting up their country. The Arabs can figure it out. Well, as soon as the British Army left the region, war broke out between the Arabs and the Israelis. Not only was it the Arabs that was living in this land, but we had Egypt down here, we had Jordan on the east, we had Syria and Lebanon on the north, and they all joined into the battle. Now, this map on the right-hand side shows what it looked like in 1949 when an ceasefire, when an armistice was finally agreed upon by all the fighting forces. And these purple places are land that was originally part of the Arab state that Israel had taken over during the almost 2 years of fighting. And they took over this whole area up in the north. They took over part of this area down south, and some of the area right up against Jerusalem, in fact. And so this was the way that things stayed for almost 20 years. Does not mean it was 20 years of peace. There was constant, conflict between the two sides, finger pointing back and forth about who was responsible for what, and there some various attempts at ceasefire for about this and that, and I mean, just because there wasn't major confrontations doesn't mean peace had been discovered. So in 1967, we have what was known as the 7-Day War, and it started out like this, where we have the way it was in 1949. This area here was basically ruled by Jordan, included Jerusalem, most of Jerusalem. This area down here, the Gaza Strip area, was controlled by Egypt, and there were some areas up here that were controlled by Syria. So we have this had been this way since the armistice of 1949. After the 6-Day War, which lasted, 6 days, we I'm sorry, I'm trying to pull up the other map here. What we have is this scenario here, which is Israel had taken over the entire Sinai Peninsula from the Egyptians, had taken over this entire West Bank, because this had become is what we call the West Bank. The Israelis took that away from Jordan. They took not only the little pieces up here on the north that Syria had, but they took this whole area known as the Golan Heights. So Israel surprised pretty much the whole world with victory in 6 days like this. The amount of land that they took, and they were fighting against Egypt on the west, Jordan on the east, Syria and Lebanon on the north, and they basically took all the land. So after the 6-Day War, there was disagreement within the Israeli government. About half of the government said, hey, we should give this land back to Jordan and Egypt in return for peace. The other half of the government said, wait a second, we should give this land to the Arabs, and this would be their home territory. They could have their state that they want now. And they couldn't really figure it out. And it was too bad. Within a couple of months, the Arab countries all came together, not just Egypt, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon, but all the Arab countries in that part of the world came together and said, they weren't going to negotiate with Israel, they weren't going to recognize Israel, and there wasn't going to be any peace with Israel. So they basically we lost that opportunity to again to bring a homeland for the Arabs. So we continued on. There were a couple more opportunities that we had. One was when President Jimmy Carter was in office, and he brought the Prime Minister of Israel and Yasser Arafat, who was the head of the Palestine Liberation Organization, who basically represented the Palestinian Arabs at the time. and they said, "Hey, here is a map." Now this is kind of complicated. The orange is basically the land that was going to be given to the Palestinians. This is the Gaza Strip. It's kind of overlaid here to make the map a little easier. But remember, Gaza is off down here somewhere. The little blue triangles are Israeli communities that would be abandoned. The Jews would have to move into Israel. The white areas are security zones that would eventually be turned over to the Palestinians. This kind of striped area is a security zone between Jordan and the Palestinian area. It would be controlled by Israel. All the dark areas are cities that existed. And so the thing was, Yasser Arafat did not think this was a good idea. Part of it was he continued to believe that the Arabs weren't getting the best deal they could, that this was a deal that had basically been drawn up between the Israelis and the Americans, and that it was kind of like, here, take it or leave it, and he decided to leave it. He felt like the Arabs were not being treated as a nation group, but simply being treated as a group of individual groups, and so he just said, you guys aren't doing this in good faith. You're just trying to appease us. So he said no. Again, which is kind of sad, because there went another opportunity that we could have had perhaps some lasting peace. There was one last opportunity for peace, and that was the Prime Minister Olmert of Israel made an offer. This is very similar to the one we were just looking at, although it doesn't have the security zones. This is a much more contiguous piece of property. Again, the Gaza Strip was down here. There were a couple of these cities kind of deep within what would become the Arab state that Israel, for whatever reason, wanted to hang on to, and that became kind of a sticking point for the Arabs. They didn't want these Israeli occupied, controlled areas going deep into their country. And so while they were negotiating on this, the Prime Minister Olmert, basically the political situation deteriorated at home, and he had to step down, said, hey, I'm not going to run again. So then the Palestinian Authority said, oh, if he's not going to be around, we aren't going to agree to this, if the person we negotiated with is not around. And so they backed out of the deal. And so again, we have lost that opportunity. And there have been other opportunities. The Oslo Accords, both sides in there actually agreed, and they started walking it out, and then it just kind of fell apart, which is too bad. There have been other ceasefires, other proposals that just have never gone anywhere, and so we are where we are today. And I think it's really sad. I'm kind of curious, to be honest, if we go back to the to the original plan that was put out there, where would we be today? Yes, people were going to be uprooted and from homes, from communities, from businesses, and relocated. But what if they would have accepted that? and worked with the problems later on. Um, we see what Israel has done as far as they've created a country, a very powerful country, a prosperous country, well known for their technology and some of the things they've done agriculturally in the desert. And I'm saying this not to put the Arabs down, but they don't have anything. They have allowed some of the terrorist organizations to take control, and that's caused nothing but suffering. And I'm not saying that Israel, has been all good in that, but it just, I guess, there's always the what ifs. But hopefully, I taught something, you learned something. If we could, again, it's not as simple as, oh, if only. It's a very complex thing, a very complex process, and centuries of animosity between peoples does not help. But anyway, hopefully this was good for you. Go and follow and like, and we will see you next week. Oh, hey, don't forget to go vote. If you're in the United States, go and vote on Tuesday. And remember, it doesn't matter who wins. In the end, God is in control. Doesn't matter who's in the White House. God is in control, and we trust in that, not in man. So have a blessed week. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.